This isn't a battlefield, the alien sergeant mocked. The Deathworld girl silently smiled. Part 1, The Intake. The transport shuttle rattled as it broke through the upper atmosphere of Kethra Prime, and Lyra Vera pressed her forehead against the cold viewport glass, watching the twin moons drift past like pale eyes. She had been awake for 36 hours. She was also, by any clinical measure, completely fine. Around her, 42 alien cadets shifted, groaned, and emptied their stomach contents into the provided sanitation bags. The Velthari boy in the seat next to her had gone a worrying shade of gray. The Ashen female across the aisle was breathing through a mask that delivered mild sedatives. Lyra ate a protein bar. She had packed 17 of them. She was already on number 4. When the shuttle landed with a bone-jarring thud, hydraulics clearly calibrated for beings with less dense skeletal structure, Lyra was the first one standing. She grabbed her pack, slung it over one shoulder, and walked down the ramp into the blinding gold light of Kethra Prime's morning sun. A wall of heat hit her like a fist. Maybe 40 Celsius. Maybe 42. She squinted, adjusted her grip on the pack strap, and decided she liked it. Behind her, the other cadets descended slowly, some needing assistance. One of the Velthari required a cooling wrap around his neck before he could stand upright. Standing at the base of the ramp, arms crossed behind his back, was Sergeant Zyrex Thorne. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with the segmented exoskeletal frame of the Keth warrior caste, his body in natural armor of dark chitin plates layered like ancient stone. 4 eyes, gold and unblinking. A ridge of sensory spines along his skull that flared when he was displeased. They were fully extended now. He looked at the cadets the way a sculptor looks at raw stone, not with affection, but with the calculating patience of someone deciding how much to cut away. His gaze landed on Lyra. She looked back at him with the expression of someone waiting for a bus. Something flickered in those 4 gold eyes. Not quite recognition. More like a question he hadn't formed yet. Part 2, The First Day. You are soft, Sergeant Zyrex Thorne announced, pacing before the assembled cadets on the training field. Every one of you. Your planets gave you comfort. Warmth. Stability. You arrived here believing those things prepared you. He stopped walking. They did not. He turned slowly, letting the silence expand, letting each cadet feel the weight of his attention. Over the next 8 weeks, he continued, I will dismantle every assumption you carry. This program has a 63% washout rate. By the 3rd week, half of you will be requesting medical evaluation. By the 5th, several of you will be gone. He resumed pacing. You are not soldiers. You are applicants. And this, he gestured broadly at the red dust training field, the obstacle towers, the heat-shimmering horizon, is not a battlefield. This is where we find out which of you deserves to stand on one. Silence from the cadets. Then, from somewhere in the middle rank, a quiet voice. What's the temperature going to hit today? Zyrex turned his head slowly toward the source. Lyra Vera stood in the 3rd row, pack at her feet, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. Cadet, he said. Sir, she replied. Did you have something to contribute? I was just curious about peak temperature. For layering purposes. For gold eyes narrowed. 51 degrees Celsius by mid-afternoon, cadet. High humidity. UV index rated hazardous for most species. Great. She reached into her pack, pulled out a long-sleeved cooling wrap, and tied it loosely around her neck. I'll keep the wrap handy then. Thank you, Sergeant. The spines along his skull flared slightly. He filed the moment away and continued his speech. Part 3, The Culling. By day 3, Lyra had made a quiet kind of reputation. Not through anything she said, she rarely spoke unprompted. Not through any deliberate act of defiance. She simply continued. While cadets around her struggled and adapted and occasionally wept into their comm units during the night rest cycle, Lyra Vera completed each task and then stood, waiting, for the next one. The midnight endurance run, she finished second overall, behind only Cadet Drexa of the Ocean, who had 4 legs. The stress immersion exercise, 6 hours confined in a pressurized isolation chamber with fluctuating gravity, she emerged, blinked in the light, and asked if there was food available. There was not. She produced a protein bar from somewhere and ate it while the other cadets were helped to their quarters. Sergeant Zyrex Thorne watched all of this. He watched it the way you watch something you don't entirely understand, with attention sharpened by unease. On day 5, during the midday heat drill, a 4-kilometer run in full field kit at peak temperature, designed to push cadets toward their physiological limits, he positioned himself at the halfway point to observe. The first cadets came through struggling. The Velthary boy was already on his second cooling pack. The Ocean female had activated her thermal suit's emergency fans. Then Lyra came through. She was sweating. He could see that much. Human thermoregulation was a remarkable and, many species found, unsettling process. She was drenched, her dark hair plastered flat, sweat marking her uniform in wide patches. She was also running at a steady, rhythmic pace, and she was humming something quietly to herself. She passed him without slowing. She was not at her limit. He could see it. She was at perhaps 70%. Maybe less. The spines on his skull remained flat, but something tightened in his chest. What are you? Part 4, The Mock. Day 12. The scenario exercise. Sergeant Zyrex had designed it himself. A collapsed structure simulation, rubble, broken atmosphere generators creating pockets of low oxygen, extreme heat from a ruptured thermal conduit represented by industrial heat lamps running at maximum output. Cadets were divided into teams. The objective was extraction, get a simulated casualty out of the structure in under 40 minutes. Most teams failed. Not through lack of effort. Through hesitation. The environment was simply designed to exceed comfort thresholds, to introduce the kind of chaos that makes training minds freeze. Lyra's team went in last. Zyrex stood at the observation post with his senior trainer, Instructor Vale, watching the monitors. Cadet Vera's team, Vale noted. Placing bets? I don't gamble, Zyrex said. Pity. Vale tilted her head. I'd be betting on the human. On the monitor, they watched the team enter the structure. The other cadets immediately slowed, responding to the heat and debris. Lyra did not slow. She moved forward, scanning with calm efficiency, and then she started talking. Not shouting. Not barking. Talking, steadily, clearly, issuing assignments to her teammates with the relaxed authority of someone who had done this before. She hadn't. But her voice carried a certainty that translated across species, across language barriers, across fear. The team responded. 28 minutes later, the simulated casualty was out. Zyrex walked to the exit point as Lyra's team emerged. Most of them were flushed, exhausted, leaning on each other. Lyra was still sweating. She was also standing straight. He stopped in front of her. Cadet Vera. Sergeant. This isn't a battlefield, he said, the same phrase he'd used on day 1. But this time, his tone was different. There was an edge to it, he recognized, with mild discomfort, that he was testing her. Pressing, somehow, to see if she'd crack. What you just did in there, that was a controlled exercise. Simulated stakes. Real combat is? Different, sir. I know. You don't know. She looked at him steadily. I'm from Earth, Sergeant. He waited. Gravity 1.0 standard. Axial tilt produces temperature extremes from -60 to +55 Celsius. We have weather events that level structures. We have microorganisms that can kill in 48 hours. We have fauna capable of hunting in packs, in darkness, in water. A pause. We don't have a word for apex predator in our oldest languages because we were competing for the title for a very long time. Silence on the field. I know this isn't a battlefield, Lyra continued, her voice quiet and entirely without arrogance. But I was born on a death world, Sergeant. I've been training for one my whole life. Zyrex Thorn looked at her for a long moment. The spines along his skull, for the first time since the program began, lay completely, perfectly flat. Not from discomfort. From something closer to respect. Epilogue, Week 8. At the closing ceremony, of the 43 cadets who had arrived, 19 remained. Sergeant Zyrex Thorn stood before them for the last time as their instructor, and for the first time, he did not pace. He simply stood still. I told you on day 1, he said, that this was not a battlefield. He paused. I was wrong to imply you weren't ready for one. His gaze moved, as it always did, Vale would later note with quiet amusement, to Cadet Lyra Vera, standing in the front rank, pack slung over one shoulder, looking for all the universe like someone waiting patiently for the next hard thing. Some of you, he said, already were. Somewhere in the galaxy, humans are considered an oddity, a soft, short-lived species from an unremarkable blue planet. The ones who've trained alongside them tend to stop saying that fairly quickly.